Today I'm going to show you how to make these little bags on your embroidery machine. They're fully lined and they're pretty easy to make. The assembly of these larger bags are a little bit different than my smaller bags because I've added some basting stitches before the decorative stitching. So grab your supplies and let's get started. Okay, to make one bag, you're going to need the following supplies. Exterior fabric, 12 by 8, 12 by 6, and 12 by 3 inch pieces. Lining fabric, 12 by 8, 12 by 6, and 12 by 3 inch pieces. 100% cotton batting, 11 by 8, 11 by 5, and 11 by 2.5 inches. I do not recommend polyester batting. Embroidery machine with a 6 by 10 inch hoop, stabilizer, 12-inch or larger nylon zipper, not a metal one, polyester or rayon embroidery thread, a size 11 embroidery needle, Scotch tape, and general sewing and embroidery supplies such as scissors, pins, ruler. You'll also need small scraps for appliques only if your bag contains applique. This one does not. Okay, as you can see, I already have my 6 by 10 inch hoop prepared with some cutaway stabilizer. Now I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch out my placement stitches for my zipper. Now that I've stitched my placement lines right here for my zipper placement, I'm going to place my zipper right there in the center, and then I'm going to use some tape, and I'm just going to tape it in place so that I can stitch my fabric to the bottom edge of the zipper. You can use Scotch tape. I'm only using the painter's tape because I think it will show up better in the video. Okay, now my zipper is nice and secure with the tape. And two things I want to mention. One, you notice that I have a much longer zipper than the 12-inch zipper that's required. That's simply because I order my zippers in bulk, and I always order a size 14. That way I can use them for anything. And the ends are going to be cut off anyways later. And just make sure that your zipper pull is away from your stitching area, and the little tab at the end is also away from your stitching area. Also, I used yellow thread. That's just simply because the first color in my decorative stitching is going to be yellow for the paws. And that way I don't have to constantly change my colors every time, because my basting stitches won't show, my placement stitches, my basting stitches, and the line that stitches the fabric to the zipper will not show, so it really doesn't matter what color. So this is just done for a little time saver, that's all. Okay, now I'm going to place the lower bag portions onto the lower edge of the zipper. So I'm just going to place it with the wrong side facing up, and then I'm going to secure it with some tape. You could use Scotch tape, but I'm using painter's tape because I just think it'll be easier for you to see in the video. So I'm going to secure it in place. Now I'm going to repeat that step with my 12 by 6 inch piece of lining fabric. And I'm going to line it up, right side facing down, just like I did the front one. And I'm going to line it up with that bottom edge of the zipper too. Then I'm going to secure it in place with some tape. Now I'm going to take it to my machine, and I'm going to stitch these two pieces of fabric together to the zipper. So it's going to create a stitch right there. And then I'll remove it from the machine for my next step. See, I've put a line of stitching there. And now I'm going to remove my tape. And I'm also going to mention that When your tape starts getting like that, where a little edge gets curled up, you're going to want to not use it so it doesn't catch up on the, so it doesn't get caught up on the sewing machine or the embroidery machine and start sticking to it. It could really knock your hoop off track. So now those are both stitched down. So what I'm going to do, and I want to make sure that you see that this lining fabric is up and out of the way of my next step. So now both of these are up. So now I'm going to take my 11 by 4 inch, I'm sorry, my 11 by 5 inch piece of batting. And if it's not a straight edge, you can easily cut it. This one's just a little, not perfectly straight, but that's okay. It won't show. So now I'm going to line it up with the line of stitching. Okay, I'm going to pull this down over my 100% cotton batting. Okay, so it's nice and smooth. You can use a little bit of the sticky basting spray if you want, or you could use pins. I'm going to give it a shot of my basting spray. If you use pins, just make sure that they're not in way of your stitching line. So put your pins right along there and right along the bottom edge. But what I'm going to do is put in some basting stitches next. Okay, so it's gonna, pins will no longer be needed. If you do put pins in for this part of it, you can remove them after the basting stitches are in. So I'm going to go to the machine right now and I'm going to stitch out the basting stitches. And then after the basting stitches are complete, it's going to stitch out the first color of my decorative stitching, which is going to be the little lizard guy's hands, paws, whatever. Now, while I'm stitching this, I want to make sure that you know this piece here needs to be up and away from your needle. Okay, you're not going to be stitching through this, so make sure it stays up while you're stitching all these stitches here. Okay, as you can see now, it stitched the basting stitch. Then it did the little lizard's feet. So now I'm going to put it back in the machine and I'm going to finish all of my decorative stitching on the lower portion of the bag. And remember, this is going to be kept up and away from your stitching line. Now all the decorative stitching is complete, so we're going to remove these pieces of tape. And we're going to apply the upper fabrics the same way we did the lower fabric. So you're going to take your 12 by 3 and you're going to put it right here along that upper edge. This is your outer fabric. And tape it in place. Okay, you're going to flip this over. And now you're going to pull this down and out of the way. And you know what? Wouldn't hurt. You can go ahead and give it a little taping to keep it in place if you want. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay, so now that's out of the way. So now you are going to repeat the same step with your backing fabric. You're going to use your 12 by 3 inch piece and you're going to place it along the edge of stitching at the end of that zipper. And you're going to tape this in place. Okay, now you're going to take this to the machine. Make sure this fabric stays down like that. And you're going to take it to the machine and you're going to stitch out this row of stitching. Okay, now that this stitching is done, there's something that I want to show you. It happened off camera, but as I was stitching, somehow this underside kind of flipped over. And as you could see, like right here, there's some stitching. It got caught in the underside got caught in the stitching. So I just ripped out those couple of stitches. It was only about 1.5 inches worth. But to prevent that from happening in the future with these bigger bags, it's more liable to happen. I just stuck a piece of tape on the side there, and then that held that particular piece down while I finished stitching the correction. So it's the kind of thing that happens, but if you catch it right away, you could remove the stitches before it gets too big of a project to remove stitches from. So now I'm just going to remove all this tape. And you know what? I'm going to tape this down on the back side also, because for the next step, you're going to want to make sure that this stays in place. Okay, so what you're going to do is take your 2.5 by 11-inch piece of batting, find the smoothest edge. I could really cut this a little straighter, but just for quickness, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now what I'm going to do is fold this upper edge up, just like we did on this bottom edge. And then I'm going to give this a quick little shot instead of using pins. I really don't like using pins because I worry about them getting caught in the stitching line. So if you use a spray, it'll hold it down nicely. Or you could put pins in, but just put them right along the edge of the frame so that they don't get caught in your stitching, because that will cause you more problems than you really want. So now I'm going to go take it to the machine, and I'm going to stitch the basting stitch that goes along there, and then I'm going to stitch the upper portion of the bag. Okay, now remember, this is tucked away so it won't get caught in the stitches this time. And I'm going to make sure we get the other side as well. And that'll keep everything in place until I get the basting stitches in. There we go. All right. Okay, now as you can see, there's my basting stitch. And then there's the stitch that goes around along the upper edge there. So now as you can see, the back has no stitching through. I should call it the lining. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is flip this over, and now you're going to have your upper portion pulled up and your lower portion pulled down, and you're going to unzip your zipper halfway. It's very important, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to turn your bag right side out, because you're going to be turning it right side out twice. So now what you're going to do is place your largest piece of outer fabric, and you're going to place your final piece of batting right on top of that. Okay, and then I'm just going to put in a couple of pins right next to the edge. That way I can make sure that the uppers, see how that's how it's going to look on the other side. So, put my pins in here. And then make sure this is pulled down. Oops, that's a needle. There we go. Now I'm going to flip it over and show you what the other side looks like. Okay, here's what the other, well, I'll redo this pin. There. Okay, so this is what your other side looks like. Now what I would do is take a couple pieces of tape and tape them right there, and then that will keep these from flipping over and getting into your stitching line. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the machine, and I'm going to stitch this part of the bag. It's going to go all the way around the bag once. Okay, I've stitched all around the bag now. Notice how far I kept my pins away from my stitching line. So now I'm going to pull them out. And I also want to mention that I chose, for this stitching and the final one, you're going to want to choose a thread that matches your outer fabric. Then it won't show when you turn the bag right side out. So now I'm going to flip this over, because we're going to add the back lining piece. I'll pull these off. And all you do is place this right side down over your backing, and then paste it, and then pin it in place. I'm just going to go ahead and use some Scotch tape for this, because I like Scotch tape much better, because it doesn't curl on the ends and get caught up on your machine bottom or your machine table. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for this final step. So just make sure that you've got it in place nice and snug. Okay, so now I'm going to take it to the machine, and then I'm going to do my final stitching, which is going to stitch the backing to this, and it's going to leave an opening at the bottom so that we could turn the bag right side out. Okay, I've removed the entire project from the machine, and as you can see, this is stitched down, and then it stitched the lining fabric to the back. So now I'm just going to remove everything from the hoop. And including all the tape that I used. Okay. So this is what it looks like when you pull it out of the hoop. Okay, so now what you're going to do is cut all the way around the bag. Okay, when I cut around the edges, what I like to do is, see where the opening is right there? I like to just kind of cut a little flap there, which I'll show you when the cutting is finished. And I just go all the way around the bag, anywhere between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Now, I'm just going to kind of cut it like this. Okay, get rid of this, it's in the way. Okay, so here's my opening where I'm going to turn the first turning. So I'm going to hold on to those, and then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut these pieces even with the edges. Okay, now you see how I've got we've got this little flappy thing here. Okay, so I'm just going to cut that down a little bit so it'll be easier to tuck inside. Okay, now I'm just simply going to turn this right side out for my first turning. If you've never made one before, you're going to be amazed at how you can do the lining and everything in one hoop. So now you've got the bag lining side out. Now you can do two things. You can either stitch it closed, which is what I like to do, or you can take some tape, some seam tape, and place it right along there, and then you can just iron it right in place if you don't want to do any hand stitching. But I always just find it just as easy to put in a few stitches to hold it in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, one of the last steps you're going to do is cut this stabilizer out from the zipper area. I find the best way to do this is with a seam ripper. And I very carefully put it in there. And this is a little extra heavy-duty stabilizer, so it's got 2 layers. I didn't use 2 layers. The stabilizer seems to have 2 layers. So now I'm just going to take my seam ripper and I'm going to run it along that edge very carefully. Okay, and then I'm going to finish it along this edge as well. What you want to make sure that you don't do is make sure the seam ripper or scissors or whatever you use go through the zipper as well. I did that once before, and it's one mistake that you make once and you'll never make again. Because I basically had to do the bag all over again, and at this step, when you're almost done, it's heartbreaking. So let me just go ahead and finish that. Okay, now you've got all that stabilizer out of there. So now you just open your bag up through the zipper, and now you turn the entire thing right side out. Do this bottom one. Okay, now the bag is finished. And all I do is I flip it over, give it a nice press on the back side, and then that's it. You're completely done. One thing though is if you have any basting stitches that show through, although you shouldn't, but if you do, you can just clip them away because they're cut. I made my basting stitches a lot longer than the other stitching. So just remove any basting stitches that might be showing and any jump stitches, and then you're good to go. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're new to In the Hoop by Sher, be sure to sign up for our freebie packed newsletter. It comes out once a week. Also, it'd be really appreciated if you could subscribe, like, share, or comment. And if you want to make your own bag, you can go to inthehoopbysher.com or In the Hoop by Sher on Etsy. Links will be below. Thank you for watching.